Hello and welcome to another show of Ahead of the Curve. This week I've got a very interesting speaker that's here with me, Tamuz Dubnov. I think I got that right. Did I, Tamuz?
Close enough. Yeah, it's Tamuz Dubnov, but 90% there.
Well, welcome to the show and thanks for joining me this week.
Very happy to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor.
Oh, of course. Absolutely. So I was wondering if you'd be able to give us a little bit of a background about yourself and about the company that you've created and why you've done that.
Sure. I guess I'll start with my story, and it naturally segues to what we do. I'm mixed technical and artistic background. So I'm a classically trained dancer in ballet, typically perform modern contemporary, but I'm also a circus aerialist. So whatever that means to you, right?
That's quite a diverse range.
Yeah, very acrobatic, but I enjoy the challenge, and I enjoy the kind of the creative expressionism within it. And I also choreograph, so there's a lot that goes into it. I've been doing it 12 years now, like since I was 13. Yeah, so I've been dancing for a while, and I've done it professionally. I went to a high school that was an art school where I majored in dance. In college, I got a minor in dance, performed around the world. Yeah, so done that, and that's a big part of my life. But from a technical perspective, I have a degree in theoretical mathematics with a minor in computer science and dance. I got that from UC Berkeley, University of California, Berkeley. If anybody doesn't know what UC means, graduated there with honors. Graduated a bit early when I was 18 years old. Went on to try and combine mathematics, computer science, and my artistic side, kind of seeing how all those sides blend together. Frankly, my inspiration was from America's Got Talent, where there were these really spectacular performances where it was a dancer with a dynamic background that was in sync to the dancer. Now, I say that, but it's actually backwards, meaning the video wasn't in sync with the dancer was in sync with the video.
Yeah.
So that means amazing production, video production, and a lot of rehearsals to try and really coordinate that one-on-one. As you move, it's exactly timed and situated in space according to that video. And I thought that can't be the best way to do it. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of rehearsals. And it's not reusable in the sense of, other than the production time and rehearsals times, each performance will not be like the next. And I saw some examples of this in different productions that used it, where it was not the same, right? The hand was slightly off. The video was slightly off. And it's fine. We're only humans. You can't expect the dancer to be perfect every single time. And if anything, from a dancer's perspective, that change in how you perform from instance to instance, as you get to know that piece, gives you a lot more expression that you don't have that, right? When it's synced and you have to do exactly this, you lose that sort of freedom within the piece. So the idea was to flip it on its head, use my CS degree, use my math knowledge. So CS comes in from the computer science aspect of machine vision. Well, what if the display did track the dancer? What if it actually watched the dancer the whole time? And how can we do that? Okay, and great. Well, we're tracking the dancer, but mathematically, what kind of generative algorithms can we use to make that background visual very vibrant? And then as that kind of evolved, right, everything's a process. So from the first piece where it was maybe just pizzazz and you move and particles float and fluid happens and stuff that's very eye-catching, how can it progress into storytelling, right? So there was a piece I choreographed and performed with it where there were two video sequences that were actually made to the music, and as you move, you reveal one and cover the other. So you still have that freedom to move and freedom within music and the choreography, but you start getting to that deeper expression where it's not just, let's say, sparkles, but it's fully unveiling content that is a part of that story. Okay, so that's the fancy reason of how I got dance and computer science and all this.
I just find it's very interesting how you went from, doing things in a kind of more traditional way to just looking at it kind of outside the box in some ways and saying, okay, how can we flip this around? How can we make this more engaging? Exactly. How can we create a more intimate experience between the performer and the technology?
Yeah, almost like think of it as a duet, ideally, where it's a duet between the performer and the backdrop. And when you really start to get to know it, there's a lot of, I don't know, like very subtle dynamics, subtle qualities that you start to be able to bring forward. So that was, of course, the creative of built all this initially for myself. Now if we get to the company, did this and then started getting requests, well, hey, can we use this for this event? Hey, we've got this cool thing going on for Comic-Con. Can we set up in this hotel lobby? Hey, we're in a museum. We're doing this. Can we use this tech? And moved into the direction of, okay, well, it can be a business. We can start offering, setting it up. Did all, the startup stuff, learned all the ways not to do it. Started very much as kind of a service offering. Bring us in, we'll set it up. Got not tired, but there's kind of a ceiling to it. You start building a really big operation, but there's very limited reach in terms of geography. So grew it up to a platform where now it's meant to be a tool for everybody to use and do themselves and use in whatever context they're using and whatever industry they're using. So I built it for dance, but it could be used for lots of other things. And if anything, that kind of slides back into me going back and finishing a master's I did in part-time on artificial intelligence, saying, well, we've got all this generative magic, but how can we start tying it into AI, either for new magic and new creative content possibilities, but also for analytics, and how can we start making it smarter? So it's a duet, but there's more intelligence behind it, so it can react to you or track what's going on or learn new ways. Yeah,
I'm a huge proponent of AI, and the use of AI fascinates me inside of our market segments. And I think that we're just starting to scratch the surface of what it's capable of, and the different avenues where it can be utilized, from content to analytics, from being able to, even analyze the way that performance is done and be able to give feedback from its trained neural networks and things like that. So I think that's really kind of a really interesting technology to explore. And I think it's extremely applicable to especially the way that different things are trending today, and the different ways that—
so dynamic.
Pardon?
Yeah, it's dynamic. It's changing all the time.
Yeah.
Right. You've got GANs and deep fakes coming in, and you've got all the style transfer people are used to, and you've got all the analytical AI use cases. So even our conversation now, in terms of AI, in a year, there will be new tools, new neural network architectures that unveil crazy new things. It's.
It could be like watch right now. We could be being watched by an AI neural network right now, being analyzed and critiqued as we speak. It might be learning from us.
I'm not gonna lie, we're doing some of that. We're looking at some cool stuff AI-wise in terms of learning from footage, and we're thinking about offering. Do you know what deep fakes are, more or less?
Yep.
All right, so
but I don't know if the audience viewing it might know what that is.
Oh,
so we might want to break that down.
Point.
And those of you who are watching, please again post any questions you guys might have as we're going through this. If you guys have any comments as you're watching, we'd be more than happy to engage with you and answer those questions as they pop up.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to ask away. But just big picture introduction. So we said neural nets. The idea is that the architecture mathematically is similar to like the neurons in our brain, and they reveal amazing capabilities. But what we're talking about is general adversarial network, which basically means you teach an AI to generate stuff to a point where you or another AI can't even discriminate if it's real or not. So a deepfake is all, let's say, those fake videos you see of someone saying something that they didn't actually say. Well, an AI went ahead and learned that person's face and sometimes their voice. Let's say Tacotron is a method for that. And that way you're able to completely artificially generate on video a person. And there's style again, and that actually generates a new person, or there's deepfakes that learn from existing people. But it's the idea of, I'm going to frame it as content creation. There's all these opportunities for content creation using AI. They're really open doors to stuff that previously you couldn't do. And now it's up to, I'm going to say us collectively, to figure out how it comes in, how it can be used as a tool, and then deepfake specifically, how it can ideally not be used for bad purposes, but we're going to steer towards the creative conversation. There's AI's got, good and bad to it. but a lot of good that can come in terms of creative and content creation. I just think like style transfer. Another AI example where you give it a style image and it can take that same style and apply it in a different image. So again, from a content creation perspective, you can think, I've got this base idea and I'm exploring all these options, let's say style options, and now you can just run it through with different images that you like and can emulate that style on your context. And almost put the power down a level. So you don't need to be like an ultra amazing graphic designer and spend hours. You could be, I'm going to say, a lower level creative, just exploring and tinkering and trying to figure out what it is you want to do.
Yeah, there's actually an interesting plugin. I don't know, for those of you who might be using After Effects, it's called Transfusion. And it was developed, I think, it's been a number of years now it's been out, but it allows you to easily plug in style transfers and libraries directly into After Effects, which is kind of neat. So you can actually use neural networks to create and generate some of your own AI-based content. So that's kind of cool. So Tamis, I wanted to get a little bit more into the heart of like, you were mentioning you come from a live background, a live performance background, and how did you end up like moving over or transitioning into more on the technical side and more on the development side, and creating an application that could be used today?
And
Sergio, thank you so much. Yes.
Always trying to
try and stay ahead of the curve as much as possible.
Well, it's in the name. So honestly, I did both kind of side by side always, right? So I was always performing from a young age, training, and I love that discipline behind it and the creativity outlet. But I've always been very technical. Like I finished calculus in 8th grade, ended up going to college at 15 because I got injured and couldn't dance. So they've always had kind of a relationship in my life. And after finishing my technical degree, right, theoretical mathematics, computer science, the idea was.
So was your going to school, going to college, was that kind of like a happy accident?
Maybe, who knows? It's what happened, but I definitely, I don't know if I didn't get injured, I don't know if I would have taken the same path as I did, because prior to the injury, I was dancing. Like it was school and then training. And during that injury, which was 9th grade and 10th grade, ended up just doing 10th, 11th, and 12th grade all in one, just because I had so much free time, right? You can't dance and you got so many hours in a day suddenly. But yeah, and a different version of me in a different universe might be dancing right now and not doing tech work.
Yeah. But who knows? So with your dancing background, what do you feel gives you like kind of an edge or a different mindset? Because, a lot of technologists are not necessarily coming from a performance background. Some of them are, of course, but, in general, it might be people that have, a liking in art that get them into working in a digital form and exploring different means of creating digital art. Or, a general technologist or somebody that's working in video games that gets sick of creating video games and then moves over to start creating these different platforms and things that we've been using and tools that we've been using. So I think you kind of have a little bit of a unique stance on it, coming from having that performing arts background and then moving on to the technology side, which I find is very interesting. So, I was asking, that's a good question. How do you feel that kind of gives you a different viewpoint?
So I'm going to tell you the good and the bad. The good is
how long
I built it for myself.
We've got about 30 minutes.
So the beauty in all of this is that I really enjoy it, right? I built a tool for myself, coming from the expression side of dance, and really when you enter that choreographic realm of how can I use my body to communicate a message or communicate whatever it is, kind of the soul behind the piece. That's one. And then if you start knowing, well, how can you incorporate the visuals, and well, actually I'm building the engine for those visuals, so I know exactly what I want to achieve, and then algorithmically what's possible. There's a lot of power there creatively, and that I want to say that's my edge, in that I'm leading our team to develop the tool almost if it was for me, right? If ever I want to perform or communicate something on stage and I know what I want to do, I can then go to them and say, okay, we're going to implement it in this way, in this way. Another advantage I have, which is a little weird, is I'm going to say I'm lazy. So I don't want to reinvent the wheel anymore, right? I want to build it for my very specific use, and then I want to abstract backwards. So great, I can use it for this very specific use, but I can go ahead and reuse that foundation to use it for this piece or that piece, or in this completely different setting in a children's museum. But by taking my ultra specific use case and then abstracting back maybe a layer or two, I can still build the tools so that I can create my specific use case, but also go back to make it generic enough for anybody to reuse in their way. And then that also goes to the bad, that with a business hat on, right? CEO of a startup, it's a big part raising money, all that business element there. Built a tool for myself rather than going to the customer, learning their needs, and then working backwards, which is really the way you should kind of build a business, right? Get to know the market, get to know their needs. From there, go ahead and build a product for them. Well, I built a product in tech for me, and then I started getting to know the customers. So that's the bad. The sequence there is not quite right. But in the end, it's okay. It kind of all, it's a happy ending because we're entering kind of the experience economy at large, where people, I'm going to say brands, venues, activations throughout are really starting to try and get to know their consumers and create experiences and engage them, and ideally express the brand's values or express the brand in new and innovative ways, which kind of parallels me expressing myself as a dancer. So I want to say that's an edge I have, that mix of creative with the technical backbone to know what's feasible, what's not feasible, and then how to also architect it so it can be reused by people who are far less technical or ideally not technical at all.
So I think this leads into an interesting kind of transition. What do you like? Who are? How can I phrase this? Who are your typical customers? Who are the users of the software that you guys are creating? But more than anything, like what business markets are you finding yourself working more and more in? Are you working in concerts and live events? Are you doing corporate or more experiential kind of markets? Like, are you doing a little bit of everything? Kind of how does that kind of play out? And it'd be also really interesting to hear from the audience as well that's viewing in. What markets do you guys work in? What are you guys technologists? Are you working in live events? Are you working in marketing? A little bit about what you guys are up to would be really interesting.
Yeah, actually, in responding to that, do you mind if I share my screen? Maybe
I
I
can
show a video.
Yeah.
It always helps set the context. And I'll talk through the videos as we show it. And I'll get to your question, I promise, on exactly who it is we're engaging and where that went. But it'll make much more sense if you see what it is we do. So experiential, as he's walking, the walls and the floor, of course, everything's reacting. So again, this is meant to kind of ignite your curiosity, your imagination. That's kind of been our mission statement. Of course, you can see those assets can be branded, right? Coca-Cola is revealing, bottles are falling. So it's got a very practical use case in terms of branding and experiential marketing. Another big part of it is we built it to be really quick to set up. So in all honesty, our largest customer right now is events. Because it's so flexible and because it's such a quick setup, we get most of our requests are actually for conferences and events that don't have the bandwidth or the budget to go ahead and build something from scratch. Or not a nightclub that's going to spend some crazy amount building something very custom for their space, but there's something that, let's say, it's a trade show booth and wants to activate the LED wall they have. So that's something we're strong at. You can customize quickly, you can set up quickly. You could do it indoors, outdoors. You saw some examples of floor activations. So that's where we are now. In the future, we want to be in more and more permanent installations. So, everything's a process, everything's a journey. And what we're really aiming to do is be something open to the graphic design community at large. So something where they can create their own assets and use it inside of it. And then even go a step further to the point where, okay, best way I'm going to phrase it is think like Photoshop. We want to be like the Photoshop for experiential media. So you want to be that go-to where you're going to move on and design your static elements, and then you want to incorporate in real-time assets. Well, we want to be that easy authoring tool so you can mesh those layers together, use those assets you created inside of what we call Looking Glass, or embellish particles using your assets. So that's where we want to get to.
So I noticed that there's a lot of pieces inside the content that you just showed that represents a lot of touchless interactivity, which is really, really kind of enticing. How do you feel our current situation with COVID-19? How do you feel it will change the way that we engage with the technology today?
Oh, I have a few answers for this. So one, behind the scenes, what we developed is triggering. So what that means is you have an experience, right? You move and whatever it is, and the experience reveals itself or interacts with you.
Do you have an example
triggers?
By any chance?
I do. Hold on one sec.
I think that would be really interesting to show.
Yes. There we go. So whenever the screen shows, I'll share it. But that's something we've worked on before, is just a way to give people more of a journey, right? So you've got an experience and you combine it with multiple to make it a journey. So what you're seeing here, for example, is those stars. You see them circled. When you hover over them, you trigger another experience. So the point is,
and that's all like done through heat mapping, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So again, going back to one of being the Photoshop of the experiential media, we want this to be very easy. So initially, we built a really sophisticated model that learns your gestures and you train it, and then we totally scraped it. None of our users wanted it. None of our clients asked for it. It was too much. So we've got this more usable one that people are using. So effectively, what you have here is just a yellow square. It's a hidden layer, but you just upload a yellow square of where it is you want that trigger to be. You can also upload red squares of where you want people not to touch it. So if you have multiple triggers side by side, you could put red squares and yellow squares kind of interwoven so that one's only touching one trigger and not the other. And then you set, let's say, the number of seconds or milliseconds you want the person to touch it. So the idea is now you're making a web of connections between the experiences. So somebody starts at this experience and can then trigger another experience. And it's been interesting, right? Even from just something basic like, hey, you can start with an experience and touch a trigger and now reveal a video about that brand. To also just see how people are using it and how, I don't know how to say this nicely, almost ADD element of people, right? So people are, this is great and it's colorful and it's engaging, but there is only so much, and people get tired of stuff really quickly. It's interesting because we've also seen it vary by demographic, by age. Some people just love triggering the next thing, and it's that triggering that kind of gives them a like, oh my god. And some people will interact with the same thing for a long time, just because it's so mesmerizing to them.
Yeah, it's engaging. I think the really interesting part too is that you've got a lot of you've got a lot of outlining pieces in there that outline the person as they come in front of the camera, which I think is really interesting from a psychological perspective, because I find that in a lot of studies and things that I've read, people like to see themselves, actually. Like it's a kind of proven that you like to see yourself, and there's a number of sculptures and studies that have been done where, people you're fascinated by other people, but you're also fascinated by yourself. And I think from an artistic point of view, that's really interesting, because you're kind of transforming the way that you look in ways, in a digital environment, and pulling kind of yourself out of the world that you're currently in and going into a more digital realm.
Yeah. So honestly, that's something you can toggle off. but it's something we highly recommend that we call it silhouette reflection.
Yeah.
Is the artsy kind of graphic design language we're trying to build around it. But we've done experiences without them, and we've done experiences with them. And when someone sees themselves, and there's going to be a new version of our software coming out soonish, where you can actually put the live video of the person in, it makes it that much faster for them to pick up. So if a person has to really put time and effort into understanding what is the interaction here, you've lost them, or you've lost a good majority of them. But if they're moving and they see themselves in some way, where I'm moving my hand and I can see something moving its hand, that one-to-one where it's very clear, and sure, there's more interactions and more experiential media in there too, but being able to tie yourself into the experience is really powerful in terms of the kind of that learning curve, people getting it right away, and making it an intuitive experience, intuitive interface for them. So again, it doesn't have to be there. It's an effect you can put in or take out, but we put it in, if not 100, like a strong 90% of the time, just because it makes that interaction so much easier for the person to realize that they're in it.
Yeah.
And we found
it makes it
older
demographics a lot more instantly engaging. It sparks exactly the curiosity of your brain.
Mm-hmm. And we found that like older people who've interacted with our tech in events versus younger people who interact with it. And when I say younger, I mean like kids. The amount of time it takes them to figure out is drastically different. A kid will get it like that. Oh, that's me. It's interactive. I'm having a blast. We've honestly seen events where like older people walk by and they're like, oh, very pretty. And they don't realize that, hey, that movement is actually you. And sometimes literally people put signs and they still don't realize it. So it's interesting. It's the experience design, there's a lot of nuance you can get into.
Absolutely. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how that really comes into play in today's world and moving forward as well. Because, as we're kind of going through, as we're going through this kind of COVID-19 era of our lives, there's been a lot of experimentation that's been going on with a number of different technologies and, trying to see what sticks, what doesn't stick. There's a lot of trending things happening in virtual environments right now. And people are working in a lot of different virtual types of technologies. A lot of my friends and possibly viewers watching today have been working a lot in extended reality or XR kind of experiences and technologies to be able to do that, that help immerse people into kind of these virtual settings. What are you guys looking at kind of moving forward? What kind of solutions are you looking at, or technologies are you looking at currently, or that would kind of put you into a place to work in today's environment or in the future?
Two answers to that. So one is something we're doing right now, not experiential media, but we're kind of reusing our core technology specifically for something crucial to the pandemic and not wanting to touch contagious surfaces. We're working a hand gesture model, one where you can interact with the screen like through your fingers without touching it. So imagine, like I was at an airport a week ago. There were many dozens, if not hundreds of tablets.
What were you doing at an airport a week ago?
Still got to get around, huh? But there's so many tablets that are not usable. Think even ATMs, right? You don't want to, touching the keypads, you're putting yourself at risk. I have a friend I just talked to yesterday, and he was like, oh, I went to the coffee shop, and literally they wiped it with a wipe and like Clorox or something between every single customer, because after you put your PIN to pay for your purchase, they have to clean it because now it can be infected. So kind of reusing our gesture technology, not for the pizzazz and the experience that we have previously, but just using it much more punctually as like, okay, well, here I can control the screen and just do tabs and clicks like this.
So is that more computer vision
yes,
driven?
It's computer vision and AI. So we say we are AI plus computer vision plus multimedia. That's just the first two, no multimedia. That's just like an interface using some AI models we're working on. And the idea there
really is exciting stuff, though, because that's, those are solutions and those are types of things that we really need to be looking for moving forward.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Especially in mitigating the current wave and preventing the next wave. and letting us all go back to our
Well, even
normal
any future
lives.
threats, like I look at this as, this is kind of like a lesson learned. We kind of live life the way that we normally live life, and now we had this thing kind of come in, and it's forced us to do things differently in a lot of different ways, and impacted our lives in a lot of different ways. But it was something that was, like, I wouldn't say not predicted, but it was unexpected, and I think that, I think it's really good and valuable to be putting these things into place now, because it's not only going to help us now, but it could also help us later.
Yeah, it's a moment of reflection, honestly, for civilization at large, where we realize what we used to do and how we could do it better to prevent this, and all the times we put ourselves at risk without even realizing it. So there's, let's say, a silver lining to it, right? There's benefits that can come out of reevaluating where we stand and how we can use technology to take precautionary steps.
Yeah, but also keep it fun and engaging.
So that's one of the things. I
was going to say, yeah, also keeping it fun and engaging and interesting, and continually driving things forward.
Yeah, no, that's actually something that, if anything, now people are looking for it more than ever. We're not in a great spot because honestly, everything's canceled. All the trade shows, all the events that order us, everything's canceled because of the situation. But now, almost more than ever, people are looking for those experiences and are looking to experience something ideally very different than being at home for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks in the same environment. And if you think of us back as hunter-gatherers, we're used to different environments, and ideally we're kind of programmed that way.
So actually, sorry, that brings me up to another big question for the people that are watching is, has anybody been out lately? Has anybody experienced any of these new types of events? There's drive-in concerts that I see that are starting to sprout up now. There's a number of different events that are starting to pop up and do things and experiment. So I'd be really interested to hear from anybody viewing right now if you guys have experienced anything over the course of the last week or so as some of these restrictions start to ease up and some of these doors start to reopen again. And I think we're gonna, it'd be really interesting to hear from people about that. That would be really, really interesting to hear.
Yeah, so it'd be also good to know what your feelings are about it. Like, are you open to those, or are you still scared of going to events?
Yeah.
Just in terms of chat and comments.
Yeah, no, that would be great to hear. Good question. So I didn't mean to cut you off as we were speaking, but
no worries.
Thought just came.
We got a lot to talk about. So I'm going to jump to the other technology we've been working on for a bit, which is so the reason I went back for my master's is frankly because I finished my undergraduate computer science degree from Berkeley, great school, everything's great. You think I'd know everything. That was what, 7 years ago. And not saying that education is expired, but kind of expired. The AI revolution has been over the last 4 or 5 years, and my education was 7 years ago. So a part of my master's was, hey, let's get a master's in AI. I'll know what's going on again, all the amazing stuff you can do with neural nets. And that kind of ties into Zuzor and other ways we're using it. So frankly, we've been focusing on analytics, right? How can we know who's in front of the screen so that we can customize it better for them?
Analytics are very fascinating. Like, I think it's actually one of the technologies that have the most potential moving forward to be able to help us create better experiences. Yeah,
and we're pushing towards that in the sense that we don't care about who you are. We don't want to do facial recognition, but we're curious about like facial detection, like what age, gender, how are you interacting, how long you're interacting, so that ideally if a child steps up in front of an installation versus an adult versus an older adult, we can actually have the content intelligently change and say, oh, this kid's stepping up, why don't we put up a Disney experience for them? So that's one step of AI we're looking at. And then another step is, like I mentioned, triggering, right? So you have different triggers. Somebody starts at this experience, they go to this one, then they're here, and then they're there. We're looking at, or we're measuring analytics on the path and how long people spend on each, and then how that all drives back to the content designer. So let's say the graphic designer designing it, can they make 2 versions? Can they release both? And then can they get analytics and see, well, how well did one work? what audience did they engage it with, better or worse. Almost think like A/B testing, but instead
Yeah.
of it being a landing page, it's A/B testing for graphic design and experiential media. So that's something that really excites me. Like when you can actually get there, release both, release 10 versions, and get back the numbers and iterate and learn and bring that data perspective into content creation.
Yeah, and I mean, we've been seeing a lot of trends in that, especially over the course of the last few years, about heavily data-driven content, and using data to be able to produce graphics and things like that. I mean, talking about AI, a great example would be Rafik Anadol, who has been, kind of the staple artist right now in, taking neural networks and applying them to all kinds of different things to generate these beautiful pieces that he's been creating, throughout the world. And I think that's, he's kind of I would say he's definitely a pioneer in that area, in that realm, which makes it really fascinating, kind of opens up the floodgates for a lot of people to be able to explore.
Yeah, to be honest about him, I think his brilliance is, sure, there's the implementation. You can do Stylegate and do stuff like he's doing, but part of his brilliance is how he ties that in. Artificial intelligence, neural networks are kind of scary, right? If you're not, let's say, in the technical world, that sounds scary. You don't know what it means. Maybe you think Terminator, but a part that he's able to do really well is he's able to verbalize it in a way that's very human, right? It's almost memories. It's imagery inspired by human memories in a way that really connects you as the observer to what you're looking at, more than just pretty, but kind of almost makes you question yourself, your humanity. So that's something I think he stands out. Like a beautiful work, absolutely beautiful, but also the narrative he ties into that work is really, really fantastic.
Yeah, it is. It is quite fantastic. It is quite beautiful. And Christy, yeah, it's definitely an exciting time of transition. There's no doubt about it. A force of change for us all, but in a lot of very, very
nowhere.
So
I was
pardon?
Oh no, I was speaking at ISC and like Euroshop, literally like a week before flight shut down. So I want to say like almost unexpected. The time we're in right now was, let's say, predicted, but everybody underestimated and totally didn't expect it to be what it is. So
yeah, as I mentioned earlier, definitely unexpected. Somewhat predicted, but not expected. So in terms of like how your business is working, how do you feel it affects the world that we're living in today?
That's a fun question. Let's see. So I typically, a lot of times when I get invited to conferences to speak, I talk about the experience economy and sort of how we're in transition, right? Let's say from industrial to service, and now we're going from service to experience. So what that means is, think Amazon, think Netflix. Our life is really easy now. The example I use is before the agrarian economy, you wanted to make a cake. You have to get like the flour, the eggs, the sugar, make it from scratch. We went a step further to the industrial economy. You get the cake mix. So you save yourself some steps, save yourself some time. You take another step into the service economy. Well, now I'm just going to buy like a ready-made cake from a baker. Great, costs more, but easier life for me. And now we're stepping into the experience economy. So you're no longer just buying, so for sure you're not buying the flour, no longer buying the cake mix, you're not buying the cake, you're buying the full staging of how you are consuming that cake.
Yep.
So you're going to, I don't know, sorry, stupid example, Chuck E. Cheese, an example, right, for kids. You're buying the full experience of, yes, there will be cake there, but you want the whole experience of what else is going on, what context you're eating that cake, who you're eating it with. That's kind of where we're going, right? If you're thinking,
I mean, to be honest with you, you can almost compare it to like going and buying coffee at Starbucks.
You can make coffee at home.
Starbucks has created it.
Go to Starbucks.
Yeah, they've kind of created their own, well, the brand, but they've created their own environment, right? They've kind of taken that old tradition of coffee shops and then stepped it up a notch so that you have a kind of more modern, they kind of reinvented a coffee shop. They turned it into a modern experience. And you're going in, you're buying that cup of coffee, but that you're basically paying for that that whole vibe in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So in the experience economy, you could almost say that you're paying for two things. One, the feeling you get, and the memory you leave with. And that's something that Starbucks is great at. Also coffee and, the smell when you step into the store, but also how they make you feel. They've positioned the brand in a great way that you want to go and experience that. And you want to go and consume the coffee there, get the coffee from there. Sure, their product is top notch, and I get Starbucks all the time. But a part of the loyalty that they build is that experience around it. And even in the naming, right? They could say small, medium, large. They don't do that. It's not a part of the brand experience they're going for. So that's really where we're going. And if I jump back to Amazon and Netflix, they're kind of driving forces on all, let's say, the location-based businesses. We've had conversations with grocery store designers saying, well, everything you can get at Amazon, you can get it delivered, right? They bought Whole Foods, like literally everything's delivered to your doorstep. And I know lots of millennials who are doing that. They don't really go shopping. Everything just comes home.
I mean, I can tell you, like, a bulk of our stuff comes from Amazon here at our household.
Yeah,
and I'm sure a bulk of everybody that's watching stuff probably also comes from Amazon.
So now the $1 million question for the companies who have grocery stores that are not Amazon is, well, how do I sustain my business? And a part of it is moving kind of past that service of, we're going to sell you whatever produce you need, and getting into that experience, right? Getting to the experience economy of, you are going to go shopping, whether it's on your computer or in person or at our store. And well, at our stores, we can do immersive projection or something like that to add to the experience. But we can also play with the tangibles of how you touch stuff, the smell, the music, the ambiance. It's really putting a lot of force on retail, groceries. I mentioned Netflix, that I talk about movie theaters. There's, if you ask me, they're in an existential crisis of, who's going to go to a movie theater when you've got thousands of movies in your pocket on your phone?
Yeah, well,
so
you've noticed
really
a lot of those
step up their
companies kind of
experience,
transitioning to just delivering them at home and allowing you to watch what you would watch in the cinema at home. And that's going to be an interesting business model to see how that kind of adapts and changes moving forward, because it's definitely been one of the areas that's been crippled the hardest, and is one of the industries that's the least likely to make a comeback.
Yes, it is. They're in a tough spot. I'm curious to see where they end up. We've had an installation that was at a movie theater where they used it to activate the entrance. Definitely add to the engagement and the experience of being at the theater. Kids personally, when they came to the movie theater, would go crazy at our installation. I can show it if you want. And parents had to like pull them to the actual movie when it started. But that's one of those things that it's interesting, right? People are naturally social creatures. And I don't think we're going to get to a place where people are not going to go to the movie theater. I think people are still looking for the experiences.
I agree.
So,
I mean, we are experience seekers. I was watching, we had the SpaceX launch that was scheduled to go off yesterday, and I found it interesting because one of the poll questions was, how many viewers would be willing to get on a rocket and go to space? And the result was 84% of viewers all were willing to jump on the top of a rocket and blast into space, right? I would love to hear if you guys would be willing to be strapped to a rocket and be blasted off into space. I think it would be exhilarating, but I don't think I would also want to spend 110 days up there. So, but it's an interesting concept and an interesting question, because we are experience seekers and we seek those experiences. And, that's what I think that's what's really interesting in the way that the experiential businesses are generated, is we're trying to create, we as a community are trying to create these unique experiences on all kinds of different levels, from retail to entertainment to, even I like to use the example of a car. I mean, that is an experiential experience because of the way the car is, how the car feels, how you feel when you're in the car, that sort of thing. There's a lot of that goes into that. And a lot of those different the ideology of it all transitions itself across all of these different markets and these different market segments, and they're applicable to all of them in a lot of different ways.
100%. I know a lot of the things we cover is sort of the type of experiences. So we say there's a like passive participation versus active participation. There's absorption versus immersive. So basically, what is the experience like, right? Are you interacting with it? Or are you just watching, right? Think passive but absorbed, okay? That's like a theater, right? You're not going on stage, you're not interacting, but you are definitely absorbed, but like passive participation. There's active participation, but absorbed. Think like education, like a cooking class. There is a immersed and active participation. Best examples like escape rooms. There's, which one did I not hit? There's a fourth one. Oh, active participation plus absorption. Think like an art gallery, right? You're moving, you're active, but you're absorbing the pieces. So all of those are sort of different ones. We say there's different kinds of experiences. So think on how you're trying to engage your audience. And there's not one right answer. Like an amusement park has a mixture of all of these. And maybe that's a part of the journey you want to create. Like we're going to start with this experience and then go there, and then a cooking class, and then a movie. But being able to kind of quantify which it is and when is really powerful. And then also the duration, I think, is important. How long you want them to engage with each, and how long can you expect them to engage with each. And that, again, also relates to age and kind of attention span and what you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Tammuz, I think we've pretty much gotten to our 45, a little over our 45-minute mark. So I just wanted to thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute privilege having you here. Great information and great context. It's been awesome. I've really enjoyed having you on the show. For those of you watching,
thank you.
Pardon?
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No worries at all.
For those of you watching, if you would like some more information on Tammuz's company, please check out www.zuzor, Z-U-Z-O-R, or Z, depending on which country you're from, .co. We're going to continue, of course, on with the conversation, and please tune in next week as well. We've got Nick Rivero from Meptic. From Meptic that's going to be on, and we're going to be talking about some more information about virtual environments, virtual production, and the future of the live entertainment industry. So, as I say every week, thanks again for joining. We're going to continue on the conversation and stay ahead of the curve. So, Tammuz, you had some stuff you wanted to show a little bit earlier. I think we were talking about the movies and film industry, or movies and the experience of movies.
Yeah, let me show that, and then there's something else I like to show, which is the lecture use case.
Thanks, Brett. Thanks for joining me, man. Sorry.
You, no worries. I can show just a movie theater example, the floor projection. And then another fun use case that people like is the lectures. So we'll show that next. But yeah, you can see here it's set up, just projected on the floor. They had it Oscar themed. But as soon as you walk in, you go ahead and you light up the floor. If I can poke holes at this installation, for example, I think something they missed is a sign telling people, hey, this is interactive. People who realized it pulled out their phones and interacted and had a blast, but not everybody realized it. And it goes back a little bit in our conversation of very young kids versus elderly people might not know to look for it, might not know to expect it. But it was yeah, people just had a great time, kids especially. They would come and the parents would have to pull them away to actually go into the movie. Because, but that's a part of the experience. So here, for example, is a background video of the Oscars, and on top you move and you reveal the Best Picture nominees, or here you hit the Oscar, the trophy. So there's a lot of option, and again, customizing these it's easy and quick. And they didn't even use any triggering or anything fancy. They just wanted kind of something splashy. But you see, splashy still holds people.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Gets pull out their phone. Yeah, so people have a great time with that. Let me show you the lecture one because that's a fun one. So a use case that has been growing in popularity is using our technology with slides. So think of your normal slide. Think of elements disappearing and reappearing, right? So you can move and reveal elements. You can add those same effects that we started talking about a little bit. We can go in deeper depth. But really, you can take that sales presentation, or I do it in all the conferences I speak at, and you can add more to it, right? You start tying in the person to the presentation in a way where they move and they reveal something, and it's that much more engaging. And people, honestly, I get great responses to my presentations.
No, I
People
think
pull
this
out
is
their
great.
phones, people
this
post
really
about
steps
it.
up the way that a presentation is presented. You're making it a lot more interactive, a lot more engaging, a lot more appealing. You know, I'm sure for those viewing, it's definitely much more appealing for me to be able just to watch what you've got going on here as opposed to watching a slide presentation.
Yeah, no, exactly that. And again, with kind of people's attention span getting shorter and shorter, it's almost hard to expect them to sit down for a standard presentation nowadays. That's why a lot of presentations are getting so kind of nuanced and great with their graphics, because you need that to hold people. Like the content itself, there's so much content on the web that if you want their attention there and then, you need to step it up. So that's something that's been popular, and you can see here stuff from presentations I've been invited to do around the world. Like this is in Dublin. There were a bunch in Vegas, some stuff in Hong Kong and in Guangzhou. So yeah, just moving forward with what it means to present and how to engage them. And think this with triggering, you no longer need that little button.
the little clicker.
Yeah. No clicker anymore. Now in the presentations, I typically put like a trigger in top left or top right. So I move, talk, and then trigger the next slide. So also, yeah, there's like cool interactivity behind it.
So talking about some of that, it'd be kind of cool to show the folks some of the tech that you have been using kind of behind the scenes. We didn't really talk too much about that. And, you know, I love new devices. I love new technology. I love playing with new tools and new things and, you know, dabbling around with them. So I'd love to hear about some of the stuff that you guys are using as well.
Yeah, let me show you. There it works. All right. So we have a few different ways it works. So depends on the scenario, right? We're trying to be super flexible, both in terms of the setup and then in terms of the space. So are you trying to activate a floor, a wall? But are you trying to do it indoors, outdoors? What's the distance? You have a lot of flexibility, really. I'm going to jump down for a sec, because if you're trying to activate a floor, you've got the display mechanism, right? So whatever tech you're using, projection, LED wall, video walls, just normal TV. And then you've got the camera watching. And those two things here are lined up, but they don't have to be. Or here, for example, you're activating a wall. So they could be somewhere totally different. We've had installs where the interactive area is here and the display is way over there, like a music festival. Had your movement here reflect the content on the big Jumbotron 50 feet away. So that's one thing to consider. Kind of depends on the experience you're trying to design and what are the limitations you're trying to work with, indoors, outdoors, all that. So within that, we typically use depth cameras. There's a lot of precision. We can do depth clipping and give you very nuanced control on this area you're watching, this area you're ignoring. If they step this far, they're out. If they step too close, you're ignoring them. So ways to just give you that flexibility. So we're lucky enough to be partners with Orbic and Intel. So Orbic Astra is kind of our go-to depth camera now. It's infrared based. So what that means is it beams out infrared or structured light that does get obscured by sunlight. So for example, that's something you can use indoors and in bright or dark. It doesn't matter if there's good lighting because it goes ahead and projects its own infrared light. So use it in any space, but you can't use it outdoors because the sun will just mess up the signal, and you won't get a good resolution. So then there's another option, right? There's the Realsense, which works indoors or outdoors. So it's got 2 cameras. So that stereo camera gives you that depth even without infrared. They have an option if you do want to turn it on, but it means that you can use it outdoors. And if you ever see any of our footage outdoors, we're using the Realsense because it gives you that flexibility. And then even in like small stuff like how much area it can cover, the image clarity of actually like the outline of the person, how clear you're getting it. And then even not dumber stuff, but less exciting stuff, right? So for example, if you have the camera here, but the display there, how are you actually extending that feed? So between all this, there's the camera, there's the computer, and there's the display. Computer's running our software. But if you're trying to extend USB 3, it can be hard.
Yep,
we've had
very expensive to do it properly.
And very expensive, yes. So that's also something to consider. So we found a few different workarounds, right? You either, something important to mention. Our stuff does not need like a disguised media server or anything truly fancy and expensive to run. Oftentimes we run it on an Intel NUC. Those teeny tiny computers that go for like $700, or you can run it on your laptop. I run it on my laptop. In a new version, we're going to try running it on tablets. But anyway, with that computer piece, you can have it be by the display or be by the camera. So if you've got an issue where you don't want to get a super long USB 3 cable, you could put them side by side and then do an HDMI extension or HDMI or Cat5. So again, meant to be flexible and also meant to give you kind of remote authoring, right? So installing it somewhere, let's say the movie theater, you can't access it all the time. You don't want to go up to where it's installed all the time. That way you can manage it remotely and even change it on the fly. And then the other one, going back to our AI conversation, uses your webcam. So it goes into a different model that learns to dynamically segment people, meaning it gets the image, cuts out the person as best it can, and then uses that as the input. So less reliable than
the same way that you would use a virtual background on Zoom, for example.
Absolutely. So Zoom is trained. Also do semantic segmentation. You'll notice there that Zoom's great if you're here. And if you take a few steps back and you're standing up, it does less well. So their model is specifically trained for kind of that standard Zoom configuration. So we're using something more generic for like people walking around and moving. But we're not going to say it's 100% reliable. A depth camera will do better. But by going to a web camera, well, now you can play with it and explore it like that, right? You don't need to buy anything. You don't need to go and order a camera and wait for it to arrive and then do the install. This is something you can install, like, I'm going to call it a rough draft now, and you can try it on your computer now. So that's a part of the webcam motivation.
I was going to say that's super appealing too, because I mean, most of the stuff that you have on there is consumer grade hardware. So getting an Orbit camera or getting a Realsense, super easy to get your hands on one. Again, you can Amazon it and have it on your doorstep within a couple of days.
Oh yeah, no, and they're like, this is 100. They're about 160 to 180 each. Honestly, when we go on site, which we tend not to do now, we support our users remotely. We often have both, and if anything happens, we swap them out. And there's no reason not to have it. At that price point, it's not a big deal. We honestly recommend everybody have it. But during COVID, we are not going to expect you to buy stuff. So that's where webcam comes in. Or if you want to tinker or send something to somebody else, you got that webcam option.
Cool. So have you guys also been playing around with any LiDAR technology at all? Like Realsense has actually got Intel's got a new little LiDAR product that's coming out within the Realsense.
Oh, they've got that. Yes, yeah. I think the SDK is supposed to be like very compatible, and it's not small form factor.
Yeah,
like crazy resolution. Not played with that yet. To be honest, our method for adding new cameras we support is a client comes to us and says, "Make or break, we need this camera," and then we're like, "Okay, we'll bump it up." We have it in our to-do list somewhere.
So mainly project-driven features.
Yeah, we've got kind of big picture features we're working on always, and then if there's a specific camera or a specific this or that that's make or break for a project, we will bump that up on the priority list. But otherwise, we'll get to it when we get to it. Yeah. Startup, you got to prioritize.
Cool.
Only so many hours in the day.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Well, Tammuz, again, man, I'd really, really like to thank you for taking the time out of your day today and joining me today. This has been awesome. It's been a great conversation. Definitely thoroughly enjoyed it. And for those of you viewing, again, I really, really hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have in having the conversation. And I hope to see you all again next week. And everybody, once again, stay ahead of the curve. And yep, next week we've got Nick Rivero coming on. And in order to get back in touch with Tammuz, his website is www.zuzor.co. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Happy to connect on LinkedIn, too.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Oh,
LinkedIn.
Sorry. Yeah. LinkedIn's always an option. Happy to chat there.
Cool. Well, thanks again. And have a good rest of your week.